Welcome to COM 230 Adobe Illustrator. This is Lesson 8, using color, stroke, and brushes. Now, so far using Adobe Illustrator, I've already shown you guys a few things using color and using stroke. I believe I showed you brushes at one point, but I want to show you a lot more details on how to handle those and some of the options that are open to you. Let's start by creating a couple simple objects. I'm going to create a rectangle and a simple star and a simple line. And just move those around so you can see them a little more easily. Alright, first thing I want to show you is how to handle color. There's a couple different ways that you can assign color and that you can change your color. Now, as you know, over in your toolbox you do have the color of your fill and the color of your stroke. You can also choose the default colors, which is black stroke with a white fill, and you can also choose an absent color. So if I decide I don't want this filled, I can do a non-fill. That is easier to see if you show grid. Turn that on. You can also flip-flop. This double-sided curved arrow here will allow you to flip-flop the stroke and the fill colors. Okay, so those are just the basics. Now, of course, you come over here and you do have your color and your color value or your color guide, and you also have your swatches palette. Most of the time you guys will probably be working with swatches, but there might be colors that you wish that you don't have here that you would like to work with, and there's a couple different ways of achieving that. Let me first show you how to assign colors to an object. You know that you can always come over here and assign a color this way. You can also drag your colors if you wish. So right now I'm going to give this a red fill and I'll give it a light yellow stroke. I'm also going to increase the stroke of this object just to make it easier for you to see. That's a pretty heavy line. Okay, so that is one way of doing it, by simply going over here and then picking the color. You can also flip-flop between which one of these is on top by hitting X on your keyboard. And that way you don't have to keep moving all the way across your screen, so it makes it a little bit easier. Another way of doing this is to simply drag from the swatches over to your object. So right now I have my stroke on the top, and I'm going to pick my color and I'm going to drag it to my object. And that's a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. I can also change my fill color the same way. Now, if none of these colors are suiting your purpose, you can also go up to your color guide and your color blocks. Now you can pick any color in here using this picker tool, and perhaps you just want to start with a shade and then you can tweak it further as you wish. So this is pretty close to the color I currently have. Let's say I want to get this quite a bit different, maybe this periwinkle color. And I can certainly do this, and I can drag that color, same as I always do, to be the fill for that star. If you decide that you like this color and you want to use it throughout your design, the easiest thing to do is to first pull this away, open up your swatches, and to grab this color that I'm using and to drop this onto your swatches. Once it's dropped into swatches, you'll want to double click on that color, and you want to mark that as a global color. When you make a color a global color, this means that anywhere that you use this color within a document, it will be assigned as this global color. And if you decide at some point in working that design that the shade needs to be changed, or even changed entirely, not just by tone or value, but maybe you need to make it an entirely different color, if you've made this a global color, then you can change this, and anywhere that that color is used within your design will change right along with this change to your global color. If you wish, you can give it your own name. This is just a value name for C, M, Y, and K. Those are the 4 inks that are used for the type of work that we're dealing with. Okay, something else you guys might want to learn about is some of the color guide options. You see all the global colors that have popped up here, but these give you different values and tints, different shades and tints of your colors. It also shows several different colors that are complementary to the one that you have currently selected, which is this kind of pinkish color that I've chosen. So this is one way to select complementary colors for a design. Another way of picking complementary colors is to use a swatch palette, sorry. Now you already know that you have your standard swatch palette here. Let me just move this back in. You already know that you have your standard swatches right here, but you also have a number of swatch libraries that I've shown you before. You can go into Window, go all the way to the bottom where it says Swatch Libraries. And there are a number of different libraries of swatches that you might choose to work with. And depending on the type of work that you're doing, the type of design work, there might be a reason to assign a certain color group to that project. And this is one way to achieve that. You can also hand build your own swatches as well, as I showed you just a few moments ago. Your default swatches are, of course, basic CMYK is what we're using. Use RGB more for video work. But there's a number of different ones in here that you might choose. Some of the gradients are also in here. You have different gradients that you can choose. The nature palettes are quite nice if you're doing perhaps a nature-inspired shampoo brand or something like that. You might find some good options in here. And to any of these swatches or swatch palettes that you open up, you can always add additional colors as well. So if you find that you like this palette, but maybe it's missing one or two colors that you need, you can always assign another color to this palette. Okay, close that down. Let me show you a few things on stroke. Now, a lot of your stroke settings you can access up here, including the color of your stroke, the weight of your stroke, the type of stroke, and the brush that you have chosen. So you can do a lot of these things from up here. You also have the option of coming down here and hitting your stroke palette. And there's more options in here than what you had up above. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on this design. Okay. And I'm going to choose my line. I'm going to make this a little bit more bold just so you can see these effects a little bit more easily. Okay, that now has a 10-point stroke on it. Now, anytime that you have an object selected, the current selections for that stroke will come up in the window. Okay, and there's different end caps and there's different corners that you can use. And you also have the option of making dashed lines here. So let me first show you the different weights. You probably have already discovered this and you've seen me use this a few times now. But you can assign the weight or the thickness of the line here. Okay, if you're dealing with straight lines such as this or curved lines, but anything which is a line, you also have a choice of what kind of cap you want to put on it. So this is the standard cap. It ends right at the anchor point. You can also put a rounded cap on it. And you can also put a squared off cap on it. The squared off cap is different from the standard cap in that it does extend beyond the anchor point, whereas the standard cap stops at the anchor point. If you're working with an object such as this star, you also have options for the type of corners that will be shown at the corner of your objects. You have the standard corner called a miter joint. You can also choose a round joint, which gives a curved off appearance. And you can also choose a bevel, and that will simply cut the corner of your object off. Okay, another option you have is to create dashed lines. You can of course do this manually, but it's a lot more difficult. It takes a lot more time. You can select any line that you've drawn and make it into a dashed line by clicking on dash line, and then you can assign the space of the dash and the gap. And you have quite a few options here. You can go as high or as low as you need to. And this gives you 12-point of line with a 6-point gap. And you can change this to look different if you wish. Now it's really only limited by what you put in here. But that is a dashed line. And you can also change the type of corners that it will have. Okay, in this case it's just a straight line, it's not going around an object, but you can change that. If I come over to this one, for instance, I can go back to that. And you see the difference between those two corner types. This is a little bit cleaner if you're working with an object. If you're doing an arrow, you can also do arrowheads automatically. I usually do my arrows by hand using the polygon tool with a straight line, but that's a personal choice. Alright, one last thing I want to show you is expanding your stroke. I'm going to zoom back out. And for something, actually I think I'm going to work with the star. I'm going to simplify this line a little bit around the star. Oops, sorry. Alright, so I've simplified that. Now something which you can do, which is interesting, and this works a little bit better on strokes or on brushes, so I'm going to show it to you there as well, but it is an option on this. And if you zoom into your object, you'll see this a little better. But you can do something called expand stroke. And right now this is a stroke. It happens to be a stroke of dotted or a dotted line or a space line. And you can go up to Object and Expand Appearance. And you'll have a little more control over your line at this stage with Expand Appearance clicked on. This becomes much more clear when we're using brush strokes, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. Alright, let's zoom back out. Let's take the dashed line off for this. Oops. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to delete that object. Okay, when we're working with brush strokes, you can work with very simple objects such as these, or you can get much more complex. I'm just going to start with the simple objects. It's a little simpler for you guys to see these. But you can select your object, and you can go into Brushes, and you have a number of different brush strokes that are already preloaded for you. And if you choose one of these brush strokes, you'll see the effect that it has on your object. This gives it a much more organic or hand-drawn feel for most of these. And there are a couple that are preloaded in here for you. You can have a look and see what these are. But what's really nice is that there are a load of more brushes in the window and under brush libraries. Under brush libraries there are a number of different things in here that you might want to look at some point in time. I like going under the artistic brushes. I find a lot of good options under here. And chalk charcoal pencil happens to be one of my favorites. And these are all different brush strokes that you can apply to whatever object that you have selected. And there are a lot in here. So I'm going to let you guys experiment a little bit with this on your own. But there are a lot of different options that can give you some really nice looks. That a little easier to see. So as you guys are working with objects, if they seem to have too simplistic of an appearance, this is a very quick and easy way to give it a much more sophisticated look with very little work involved, really. You do want to make sure that the brush stroke that you use is appropriate for your design, appropriate for your client, and for what it is that you're designing for. There are reasons why some of these work better than others. And once you've selected your brush stroke, you can also adjust the weight of your stroke and of course the color and everything else as well. So at some point do experiment with some of these brush libraries. They really do have some nice looks to them. Another really good one is the watercolor, and I use watercolor a lot to create backgrounds with simple lines. I'm going to use my brush, do a line. I'm going to go down and select a watercolor. I'm going to make this much larger and assign it a color. I've got to use a fairly deep color to get to see all those different gradations, but you can see how it kind of creates this nice background for an object, and I do tend to use it for this purpose quite often. But you do have to go for a fairly heavy stroke. But you can see how kind of layering up a few of these lines with these heavy strokes on them can give you quite rather a nice look. This can become the background of an object, for instance. So artistic watercolor is where these are, and these do of course gray out or subdue your colors, so do be prepared for that. Some a little bit less than others. You see this one is a little bit more intense, but it has a really nice look to it. Alright, and once you've done these, again, you can go up to Object and Expand Appearance. And now each one of these color gradations has become its own object that you can edit. Okay, so I'm going to undo that and show you again. So this is just a simple line that I drew with the pencil. I've assigned it a rather thick stroke, 8-point stroke, using this watercolor effect in purple. And then once I have this selected, I go up to Object and Expand Appearance. And this will allow me to edit all these tiny little anchor points. I can edit this object very, very minutely and really get it to look exactly like what I want it to. Okay, you can ungroup these and edit these, or you can leave it grouped and work it that way. Alright, that's the end of Lesson 8 with color, stroke, and brushes. I do encourage you guys to experiment a lot with these because there's so many different options for you in stroke.